All right, so today we're going to be talking about effects chains and signal flow, and that's this notes right here. The thing is with effects, right? And when we're talking about effects, we're talking about like insert effects. Any kind of a thing that changes the sound is an effect, right? So you've got insert effects, which are compressors and EQs and distortion, stuff like that. And then you've also got like your send effects, which are reverbs and delays and things like that. And you've also got choruses and flangers and all these other types of effects. We've got tons and tons of different types of effects. And you can put different effects on your track. And what people don't always realize is that the order that you put the effect really does matter. So what we're going to be talking about today is the effect chain signal flow. And we're going to talk about different chains of effects and how to use different ones in different ways, okay? So let's just start off by talking about an effect chain, what an effect chain is. In an effect chain, the sound of each individual effect changes the signal and then outputs the affected signal. Then the next effect changes that signal, and so on and so on and so on. So when you have a chain of effects like this, right here we've got our this compressor is going into an EQ here to cut off a little bit of that kick drum. Let's just solo out the kick drum. Now in this effect chain here, so I'm going to put that one there, I'm going to put that one there, and let's zoom in on this so we can just see what's going on here. See, when you open up Pro Tools and you're using Pro Tools or Ableton Live, Logic, whatever, you've got your effects, and the result is the same for any DAW that you're using. It's just how you do it is slightly different. So in Pro Tools and Logic, you have these like effects slots in here that you can just put effects into, kind of like a rack if you know what a rack is. And with Ableton Live, it looks a little bit differently. You put them in at the bottom of your screen in boxes, and you just kind of throw them in there. Well, in here, each one of these, right now I've got 5 that I can use, but if you need to use more effects in Pro Tools, what you do is you just go down here in the bottom of your screen, down here at the bottom, click on this, and you can go inserts F through J. So we have A through E and F through J. I click on this, and now if I mouse up here, we can see I've got now 10 effects at my disposal. Now, Pro Tools has a maximum of 10 effects per track that you can use. That's usually plenty, but if you need to use more, there are some workarounds and things like that that you can do to use more effects if you need to. Now, one other thing I do want to talk about here with the effects is that Pro Tools records the audio before the effects. So if I'm recording like a vocal and I have a bunch of effects on my vocal there, well, the vocal is actually being recorded onto the track before it reaches those effects. So if you've ever been wondering, like, I've got like auto-tune, for example, if you're running your vocalist through auto-tune and you're like, I wonder if I'm recording the auto-tune. The answer is no, you're not recording the auto-tune unless you are running the vocalist into an aux track through auto-tune into another audio track. Then you're going to be recording the auto-tune. But if you just have the auto-tune on a insert on the track itself, you're not recording that auto-tune. If you mute the auto-tune, you're going to be muting it so that you're going to hear the natural singing. So that's a question a lot of people ask me in general, and the answer is no, you're not actually recording any effects that are on the track. If you want to record effects on that track, you have to do some setting up and maneuvering of stuff, which we will talk about either today or another day. I'm not really sure which, maybe today. So right now, over here, we've got this kick drum. Let's just listen to that kick drum. There's our kick drum. If I turn these off, there's the natural sound of the kick drum. There we go. Now, if I wanted to, let's say I want to put effect before this compressor, I can go in here. Let's use my one band EQ. And if I go ahead and put this in here, it's affecting the sound, but it's also affecting that compressor. Now, this is a bit hard to hear right now, and I'm going to show you a really good example a little bit later of how we can hear that better. But this effect now, what's happening is the sound is going through my EQ here, and then it's that EQ is changing the sound. It's in this case, we're taking out all the low frequencies of that kick drum, right? And then that new sound is going into the compressor. So we're starting off with the EQ, and then we're taking out those low frequencies, and then we're going into the compressor, and then it's compressing that new sound. And then from there, the compressor, then we go into our other EQ here. And this one's taking off some of the high frequencies. So this one is after the compressor, this one is before the compressor. And this compressor here, if I just throw this up here on my screen, this compressor actually will work differently depending on what we're doing with this the high pass EQ. So if I go in here and I take out, it's a little bit hard to hear because the compressor is a little bit, you can see it though. Oh, okay, you can see it actually really well. You can see how it's compressing a lot right now? And if I take out all the low frequencies, now it's not compressing as much because this kick drum has a lot of low frequencies in it. And if we take out those low frequencies, it's not going to be as loud going into the compressor. So here we go. There's with all the low frequencies still in there. And you can see it's hitting about -6 dB of compression. And if we take these out, right? But let's say, for example, that I put the EQ after my kick drum. So let's go ahead and drag this EQ here after the kick drum. And I'm just literally just clicking on it and dragging it. So I pull up my compressor and I pull up my EQ. Now watch what happens. If I move this EQ, it's not going to affect our gain reduction at all. But it will affect the sound that we're hearing. So we're hearing that sound, which is very similar to what we were hearing before, although it's a little bit different. But we can see the compressor is still operating on the full frequency of that kick drum. But what we're hearing is changing. And that's because now I have that EQ after the compressor, which is actually a really big deal. And so if you are doing sound design stuff, it's going to really change what's happening with that sound. So here, let's just see if we can hear that. If I just drag that EQ back and forth, I'm going to put my EQ here at about, let's see, put it here at like 600. Because that's what it sounds like after the compressor. It's very similar. Yeah, very similar. It would be hard for anybody to tell what it's doing to it before or after. But we can see that it makes a big difference on what's happening with our actual compressor here. Still hitting that gain reduction at -6. But if I put this here, now it's not hitting that compressor really at all. So big difference there in the sound of that. I mean, in the way it looks, but not a huge difference in the sound. And this is like what I really recommend that you do. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this compressor. I don't want that anymore. What I recommend that you do whenever you're trying out different effects and you're trying to get different things happening, I recommend that you try different orders of stuff just to see what it does, because it can lead to a really pleasant surprise of like something new happening that you weren't really expecting. So if you are in a situation where you've got like and I'm going to show you this in a minute, where we put like a distortion on here and you're compressing that distortion. And distortion is one of those things that's really affected a lot by all the frequencies. So if you take out the low end when you're running through distortion, it's really going to change that sound. And I really recommend that you try that out in different ways and do it on your own. Don't worry about asking anybody what it's going to sound like. Like don't come to me and say, hey, what does it sound like if I put my distortion before my EQ or my EQ before my distortion? I'm going to tell you, try it out and come back and talk to me about it, because this is the type of stuff that you need to hear for yourself. You need to really get it into your head what these things sound like and how it works. And that's going to really help out a lot. Great. Okay, so how are we doing on MacBook Heat here? Yeah, it feels pretty good actually. Okay, so let's just go over this one more time. In an effect chain, the sound of each individual effect changes the signal, then outputs the affected signal, then the next effect changes that signal, and so on and so on. So I have my dry sound here first, and then it goes into effect number 1, and then effect number 2, and then effect number 3, and we are, good to go there. So experiment and try different orders, change it up, and see what happens. That's the only way you can really learn about this stuff. All right, now we're going to talk about a serial chain versus a parallel chain. A serial chain is a row of effects, one right after the other. And a parallel chain is two rows of effects that are independent. They do not affect each other. So in a serial chain, it looks like the one we just had on the screen here, and it's also what you're dealing with here in Pro Tools. This is a serial chain. These are all serial chains here. So we start off with the dry sound, and then we go to the effect number 1, and then effect number 2, and then effect number 3, and then we get to our speakers and we're good to go. With a parallel chain, what you have is you have the dry sound, and then that splits into two separate effects chains, and each one is affecting that sound a little bit differently. This is really good for if you want to have like parallel drums, for example, parallel compression, where you want to have the more natural sound as well as a super compressed sound, and you want to blend them together. This is where it's used mostly, but you're also going to use it for things like distortion. If you want to dial in a little bit of distortion into the sound, but you want to have a lot of control over it, and you don't want to have the total sound being distorted, and maybe you want to EQ that distortion, then you're going to want to split that distortion off to the side and run that distortion by itself, unaffected by the other stuff that's happening. And so these are some examples of why we would run parallel chains. The main one, though, the real big one that's a lot of people talk about, a lot of people need to use and learn about, is parallel compression for drums. Now, this is also called New York compression. It's a great little trick. And here's what we're going to talk about: setting up a serial chain here. So we're going to come back to the parallel compression in just a moment, but we're going to first talk about a serial chain, which is what we've been talking about. EQ compressor, EQ tape, EQ2 tape, like this. The examples, right? So it hits this EQ1 first, and then it goes into the compressor, and then it goes into EQ2, and then it goes into our tape. Now, if you have some send effects happening, these send effects are always after the effects. It doesn't matter if they're set for pre or post fader. Therefore, the sound going to the send is the affected sound. So for example, in this case with our kick drum, the kick drum is being sent to our reverb over here. We can see, here's our reverb. You can hear the reverb. If I turn it up a little bit more, there, we can hear that reverb even more. Now, if I put on, let's put on a little distortion here. I'm going to turn this down so it's not blasting us out. And we'll just use a distortion that comes with air stuff. We'll use this distortion here. And this is a little bit hard to hear, but trust me, hold on, let's put a little, suck out that low end a little bit more. There we go. And this is going to change that sound a lot. When you put the EQ before the distortion or after the distortion, changes the sound a lot. There we go. Now we've got a nice like heavy kick drum sound. Now here's the thing, is that heavy kick drum sound, with all the distortion in here, this is going to the reverb here. So if I turn this up, that distortion is being sent to the reverb. So we're hearing the reverb with the distortion on it. With the reverb, it's a little bit hard to tell what's going on. I get it. If you're sitting there going, wait, Tony, I don't really hear that reverb so much with the distortion. It just sounds like reverb to me. Well, yeah, it's going to. To really hear it a lot, maybe let's put a delay on here. Let's use this H delay, shall we? Yeah, we haven't used this one yet. So we're going to go over here to our second one down here. We're going to go to track, and we're going to go to H delay, boop, there we go. And send that over. Let's take off the reverb for now. Okay, so we got that. Let's go ahead and send it over to our delay. I'm going to change the delay time here. There we go. Okay, there you go. A little bit easier to hear. Okay, if I take that distortion off, now let's listen to it. Okay, you can hear that. Let's take off this Hear how that sounds? Let's put the distortion back on. Hear that? You can really hear it with the delay here. So we can really tell with this delay that the effect is going through the delay. It's being sent out to this delay right here. You can hear that lots of distortion is going on right there. And if I turn this distortion off, you can hear that as well. Sounds pretty good, right? It sounds pretty cool, right? So we can hear that with this right here. It's much easier to hear it with this delay than it is to hear it with the reverb. The reverb is like really tough because the reverb is actually kind of part of the sound. So that's that right there. So the sends are always after the effects. And even if I send a pre, let's go, boop, 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 boop. How do I? Hold on, let's go up here to view. Expanded sends, let's go to B. There we go, B, boop. So even if I change this to pre, it's still gonna have that effect on it. Whether I've got it set to pre or post, it doesn't matter. Okay, awesome. Let's put that reverb back on. Turn that distortion off. All right, cool. Yep, so we can hear that a lot. Now let's do this. Let's send the delay over to our reverb. So we're gonna just go over here, and we're gonna go to bus, we're gonna go to reverb room, there we are, set that up. Wait, that's not, wrong reverb. I have a reverb called reverb room. There we go, there's my reverb, boom. Yeah, great, so you can hear that. Awesome. And you can hear that I've got the reverb now is on that delay there. Cool. All right, great. So let's set this up with a parallel chain just so we can hear some stuff going on. I'm still going to use just this kick drum here, but we're going to set this up a little bit differently. And what we're going to do is we are going to, let's do it like this. Let's go ahead and hide that delay for now, just so I can see everything. I'm going to go ahead and make everything no expanded sends. So we've got a normal view here. And I'm going to go ahead and make 2 mono aux tracks. There we go. Boom. And we're going to call this one bass drum comp. And the next one we're going to call bass drum distortion. Rondell says, hey, Tony, if that's the case, how does the pre or post on the send differ? So pre or post, and we're gonna talk about this, so I don't want to go too deep right now, but pre or post is actually where it is in relationship to this fader right here. So if it's set for pre-fader, check this out. Here, let me just show you real quick. If it's set for post fader, watch what happens when I here got this delay. If I turn it down, we stop hearing everything. We stop hearing the reverb, we stop hearing the delay, because this kick drum is now super quiet. And this fader here is controlling not only how much we're hearing, but it's also controlling how much is being sent to my delay. So if I put this back up, it's still going to that delay. Now, if I hit pre here, what this does, and you can see this little thing here turns blue, and this one over here turns blue as well. If I hit pre, then what's going to happen is when I turn this down, it's not affecting the level here. It's not affecting this send amount here. So watch this. Everything's up, we're hearing it. But if I turn it down, we're no longer hearing the original signal. Now it's a little bit hard to hear. Let me go ahead and put some filter on here. There we go. So now, if I put this one back up, right? And that's just the quick explanation. I do have some pictures and stuff that I want to show y'all about how this works to kind of help people to understand it a little bit better. Now, another thing about this though, since we're just here talking about it, you're usually not going to use a pre fader on in a normal mix situation. If you're mixing, you're sending to your reverbs, you're sending to your delays, you're not usually going to use this pre button. It's very rare. Usually what you use pre is for a headphone mix, because remember, we talked about headphone mixes for the Audient and for the O2R. If you want to send out a mix using your aux send amounts, like your knobs or your faders on the O2R, to your musicians, but you still want to control the mix in your control room, then you need to, you don't want, when you move the fader in your control room, you don't want it to affect what they're hearing, right? So that's when you would use pre. Pre disconnects them, right? So it's going, your send amount is going before your fader. So however much I move my fader, it's not going to affect what my musicians are hearing. That's really what we use pre for. You don't really see people use pre in a mix like this. I have used it for like special effects if I'm recording some kind of special effect and I really want a lot of the effect on there, a lot of the reverb or a lot of the delay to record. But I think that was more, honestly, I think that was more before I really knew what I was doing. So nowadays I would record it differently and I would just like gain it or something like that instead of like going around and messing with all this stuff. But all right, so let's go ahead and get this out of here. We don't need to see that one for right now. Where was I going? I was, let's see my notes. Oh, parallel chain, right. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to have these set up slightly differently here. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to grab these two. I'm going to move them over here. Boom, boom. There we go. And now we've got these set up here in a, whoa. In a, what is this? This is set up like, okay, this is set up like a dry, you've got a dry set. This is a parallel chain, but it's kind of like a parallel drum comp chain. Let me show you this one first, and then we're going to come back to the other one. So this parallel chain is a little bit more like a real parallel chain. Now there's a couple of ways you can do this. I'm showing you one way, which I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to show you another way as well that's not here in the notes. So it'll be in the video, but not in the notes. So what we've got here is, let's see, we're going to take these and move this over to here on both of these. So they both have the effects going on. I'm going to go ahead and mute this delay. So we're not hearing the delay. I'm going to put this onto here like this. I'm going to turn them on. Okay, so here's the thing, is that we've got the bass drum compression and the bass drum distortion here. I'm going to go ahead and put these into solo safe mode. They are being fed from our kick drum over here, which is just bass drum kick. It's another word for it. Let me just change this name. I had that from our lesson before. So, okay, I'm going to change the bass drum, BD. That's what I name all my stuff. And what we're going to do in here is we are going to take this one, and I'm going to take the signal and split it over to these two here. So I'm going to take this one first and go into my compressor here. So go down to track and go to bass drum compressor, and it's automatically going to set up all my routing and everything for me. And I'm going to go ahead and set this for this. Just I'm going to put it up to 0. And now I'm going to do the same thing for my distortion track, distortion. And same thing, I'm just going to put it up to 0 here. Now, when we hit go on this, I'm going to take these two here. I'm going to take this one here and send it so it's got no output, because I don't want it going anywhere. And this one here, I'm going to set these two to go to my drum bus. Where's my drum bus? Oh, that drum group, there we go. Boom. Okay, so now, okay, cool, here we go. Okay, so now what's happening is this. Let's see. Yeah, in this one here, I've got it set for mute. You can mute it or you can set it for no output, whatever you want to do. It ends up being the same. But these in here, I think the way I'm doing it right now is a little bit maybe easier. Like I said, there's like 5 different ways you can do this. What I've got going on right now is a little bit easier because now I don't have to worry about my fader position here at all. It's just set for none. So I'm not going to touch this at all. And I don't have to set these for pre. So again, it's potatoes and potatoes at this point. So what we're doing here is I'm taking the signal and I'm sending it to two different places. I'm sending it to the compressor and I'm sending it to my distortion. And now I'm going to adjust my sound however I want based on these two right here, these levels. So if I want to have, this is just my dry signal here. I'm going to turn down my reverb a little bit. There we go. That's like a little bit too much. Let's turn this one down a little bit too. And now I'm going to go down here and let's dial in this distortion. And you can hear as I bring it in, right? I can just pull it in just to give a little bit of sound in there, right? And let's go ahead and just one band EQ and take this down a little bit here, right? Make the sound how I want it to sound. Remember, you have full control over your sound, right? And I can dial this in just a little bit here. And this is like when we're starting to get into the magic. This is what separates like a good mix from like $1 million mix. When they talk about $1 million mixes, it used to be they talked about that because it was like the sound, you know, cost like $1 million to make. It was really because it probably made $1 million, like it's a hit record or something like that. But really, to do this back in like the 80s or even the 90s would cost so much money to get this type of stuff going because you had to have a big studio with a giant mixing console and all the things going on. And, you know, this stuff cost a lot of money. But now, all we need is the knowledge, right? Which is super cool. We just need to be able to know what we're doing and we can do all our mix stuff right here. Keep in mind, I'm showing you this in Pro Tools, but you do not need to be doing this in Pro Tools necessarily. You could do this in Ableton Live, you can do it in Logic, you can do it in FL Studio, you can do it in whatever. Can you do it in GarageBand? I think maybe you cannot do it in GarageBand. Man, maybe the limit is like, I know GarageBand is a little bit limited on like routing like this. So, but any kind of DAW that lets you route things around like this, you're golden. You're good to go. All right. So, let's go in here. And now the final piece of this puzzle that we have going here, I say I like the sound. I think the sound sounds really good. The final piece of this puzzle that we've got here is this subgroup here, and where we're combining these two signals so we can have them both going. So really why we want to do that is because once I get this sound dialed in, I've got it just like I like it. This is my kick drum sound. I like that sound. The person who I'm working with, the producer or the artist or whatever, they come in and they say, yo, that sounds great. That kick drum is awesome, but it's too loud. Let's listen to it with all the other drums. Let's dial this in a little bit more. There we go, so we can hear it with everything else. Okay. Great, so they say, yeah, that sounds fantastic, but it's a little bit too loud in general. I want to turn it down compared to all the other drums. Well, how do we do that? Well, there's two ways we could do it. We could do it this way here, where I just grab them both and I group them together. Let's make a group for my bass drum and make sure we put the right ID on here. B for bass drum. No, actually, let's go for K for kick. And I know it's confusing, but the reason why I would use K for kick instead of B for bass drum is because we want to keep B for our bass sound. And I'm going to show you all this with the bass sound here in just a moment as well, because you can do some really cool stuff with basses. So over here, now we've got K for kick. We can turn that on and off, and I can just grab it when it's turned on, and I can just dial it like this. And now I can move this around, and we're hearing both of them. And that's okay, but watch what happens. If I hit Option, now I've just lost everything, right? I have to go back and undo it, and to dial it back in, it's like kind of weird. Also, what if I wanted to use some effects on just this bass drum by itself, like this new sound that we've got? What if I want to make it a little bit thicker, or I wanted to do something with it? Well, how can I do that? Well, I'm glad you asked. And I'm talking to my puppy here. My puppy asked, hey baby, how you doing? Oh, she's so cute. She She was super stressed, and last night was the first night that she slept really well. I mean, we've only been here for a couple days, but yeah, she was super stressed for a while. All right, so here we go. We're going to call this one BD group. We just made a new aux track that is a mono aux track, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to run both of these drums, both of these channels into this group that I just made. Okay, the way I do that is I'm just going to go down here. I'm going to highlight these, hold on Shift, hold down Option and Shift, and go to my output here, and go to track, and go to BD group. Boop, and it makes a new thing here for BD group. Now solo safe this. Let's go ahead and solo this out. There we go. Ooh, that's funny. Here, let's just do this. Let's move this over here like this and get rid of this one. The reason why I did that was because these effect sends were actually before this one here. So it's kind of like a pre-fader, right? So we were sending it just to the reverb. There we go. Awesome. And now I can control my kick drum sound. I can control my kick drum sound. So now, if I wanted to go in here to my kick drum and do something to this kick drum, let's say, for example, let's say I wanted to run this new kick drum sound through Soundtoys Decapitator. Let's put Decapitator on here, mono, and I'm going to pull it down before we actually hit go on it, so it's not too loud and blasting us out. Pull it down like this. There we go. Nice and beefy. Get a little bit low end in there, right? A little bit more, right? We're changing the sound. But if I were to put Decapitator on any one of these individually, check this out. Right? It sounds really good actually. I really like that sound, but it doesn't sound like what we just did. Let's put it over here on this one and hear what that sounds like. Right? To completely different, like a totally different sound. And then over here on this one, see what it sounds like on here finally. Yeah, totally different again. That one sounds a little bit similar to this one. Ish. Yeah. Yeah, very different. Yeah, I like this beefy one. I actually really liked it over here on my BD comp. This one here, let's take it and put it down there as well and just hear what that sounds like here. Let's solo this out. And this is what I do when I'm listening to sounds, and I'll move things around and check it out and see. I really like that. That gives it some really low end punch. Y'all hear that? Really nice. Now, maybe it's too much, so I can maybe mess with my dry wet over here, dial that in, or I could even pull it down here. Well, not that. Hold on, let's turn my... There we go. There we go. Now we can dial that in. Now let's listen to everything. Yeah. And I can really change my sound. Right? By dialing those two faders there. This is really, really, really important that you kind of like get into the idea of messing around with this stuff. I can't stress how important it is. And this is why when people are like, Tony, your mixes sound dope, you know, what are you doing? It's a lot of this. This is really the magic behind everything. I'm really blending and mixing and kind of messing with the sounds to kind of pull them all together, which is super, super dope. All right, let's do this. Let's run this bass drum into our drum group down there. There we go. Nice. Awesome. Okay, so now let's take these, let's do this. Let's do a serial compression. Let's a parallel comp. Let's do a parallel comp on the drums here. Let's go back over here and do this, and let me show you this one here. This is for drums. This if you want to do a parallel drums compression. And what we're going to do with parallel drums, the idea is that you're going. The reason why they would start doing like parallel drum compression was because they wanted to get the drums to be really smacky and like have a lot of like aggression on it, But the problem is when you do that, it sucks out all the low end. Let me just show you what I mean by that. So we're gonna go over here. I'm gonna leave that one on. I kind of like that driver on there. So I'm gonna put that first. I'm gonna throw a compressor on here, and let's use Slate. I think the gray one is the one I want to use. Hold on, let me just see which one. I don't think it's this Mu. Yeah, no, definitely not that one. That's the Fairchild. I don't think it was the red one, but let's see what the red one looks like. I'm pretty sure the red one was... What happened? Oh, actually it is this red one. Okay, interesting. I wonder why they call this red. Okay, so basically this is like a 1176 type of compressor. Now the reason why I'm using this one, normally I would use my UAD ones, but I just don't have my UAD card here. I don't have my audio interface like on this table right here. I do have it here with me, so we will be going over a bunch of UAD stuff at some point because I just want to show y'all because you do have access to it all at school. But usually I would use my UAD 1176 just because I love it so much. But let's use the Slate one here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to... Actually, no, wait, I'm sorry. I'm wrong. This is not... Hold on. I got all excited there for a second. Let's use the BF... Let's use the... Okay, here, we'll use the Air one. Is it Air or... This is the BF 76. Do I have another 76 in here? I don't think I do. Dang. Oh, I do here. Here we go. Native Instruments. Okay. The reason why I'm using this one is because I like this. I think I like the sound of the 1176s on drums for this kind of stuff. I specifically like the UAD 1176 sound on the drums. There's a very specific one that I love that I put on my drums all the time, and I'll show it to you. I can't right now because I can't load it up. But the way that the 1176 compressor works is it has what they call a fixed threshold. And the way you hit that threshold harder is you adjust your input right here. So we're going to go ahead and set this for all, which is going to give it a lot of pump. And the attack, we're going to turn that up to a slow attack. And the release, we're going to turn down to a fast release. And we're going to go ahead and put this on here. And I'm just going to compress the crap out of this. I'm going to turn it down here so we can hear it more clearly. Hear that? All right, so let's just mess around with this here. And I'm going to dial this attack in. And we're going to mess, we got the release here. I'm just going to keep that release nice and fast. And you can hear how it's really pumping, right? Now, what I like about that sound actually is, and let's, hold on. We've got all these reverbs and stuff going in here. So let's do this. Let's take the reverbs. I'm going to move them over here. And I'm going to adjust them so they're not inside of the drum group. So we're going to hear things a little bit differently here. Let's just go out to our main output here with these two here. Boop, like that. Yeah. Hear that crazy, crazy sound. Okay, now it's got interesting qualities to it, but we let's go ahead and let's use this parallel compression to hear what we can do with it differently. All right, because it's like what I like about it is turn that release up a little bit more. There we go. You hear how it's like popping the beginning of each one? The kick and the snare. Right? Well, that's what I like about it. I like that pop on the kick and the snare. But there's no, like, we're missing a lot from the drums now. It just sounds like too affected. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a parallel chain for this. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in stereo audio track. And we're going to call this in drum comp. And I'm going to move this over to the drum comp here. And now We're gonna have these both going out to output 1 and 2. And we're going to go send to my drum comp here. And I'm gonna use pre on this one. Now the reason I'm gonna use pre on this one is because I don't really want them to affect one another. I want my signal to my drum comp to be going super, super crazy. What's up, country music lady? All right, let's turn this down. Okay, so here's our original sound of the drums. And now we can pull these in. And let's go ahead, I'm gonna turn this down. So we're just hearing the compression right now. Let's go ahead and suck out a little bit of the low end on there. Let's hear what that sounds like. Yeah, actually, let's put a, let's use a different EQ. Let's get a little bit more EQ bands here so we can adjust the high and the lows. And what I'm doing is I'm controlling everything that's going into that compressor just to kind of really get it a lot of control going on here. So we'll just do this, because these hi-hats are also coming in really hot. Cool. All right. Oh, now we got a weird phase going on. Interesting. Huh. You hear that phase? It's happening. Let's see if we can correct that phase. Multi-mono, other, no, delay. Time adjuster. Let's see if we can adjust this. Yeah, it's more phasey. Hear that, how that's adjusting? Yeah. Huh, wow. So we just made it sound a lot worse. And this is stuff that you have to like deal with whenever you're working with this stuff, is that sometimes you'll put something on there and you'll be like, yeah, I'm gonna make this super cool. And it's like, nope, nope, not at all. Okay, well, I'm not loving that sound there, especially what it's doing with those hi-hats. Let's see what we can do here. Sounding a little bit better. Let's pull the reverb in. Oh, no delay. So there it is without the parallel compression in there. And I don't know if it's really making it punchier sounding right now. And I'm not going to sit here and mess with it. But it's definitely adding some sustain in there and making them sound like thicker, which is not a bad sound at all. I kind of like that sound. But it's not, definitely doesn't have that smack. And when we get over to Ableton Live, I'm going to show you a little bit more about how I get like my drums to sound nice and punchy and everything like that. I do it more in Ableton Live these days. So I have my secret tricks and stuff that I use in there, which we'll be talking about when we get over there in a few weeks. All right, so that's parallel compression. Stop eating the cable. Stop it. Stop eating the cable. Sorry, the dog is like decided the cable looks delicious. I know it looks delicious, but it's not. I promise you. It's all in your head. There we go. Here, hold on. Let me move this around. There we go. I'm trying to get it so it's not in her face, so she's not like super distracted by the cable. Okay, so let's do this. Let's see, where are we? All right, so let's just take a look at this, what it says here. The compressed signal provides a smack and punch. In this case, it was also getting us a lot of the the body. and the body in the low end. Now, what happens with this compression, you heard it just a second ago, is that we did get rid of that low end in there. So we want to mix them together to get that that sound. So if we just go here, let me just play it for you one more time. Go in here, there with nothing, you can hear that low end in the kick drum. And how do oh, here, we'll do this. There it is there. Like no low end at all. And we can mix them together. Kind of like that. And I'm not a huge, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of this compressor right here. It sounds very, it's funny because all these 1176s out on the market, people are just like, oh, you have a 1176 plugin, you must, whatever. So they're all the same. They are not all the same. You can get like, I mean, I've got like so many different 1176s and they all sound different. So, all right, puppy, why'd you wake up? This is not a good time to wake up. All right. Cool. So we just talked about that one there. So the parallel chain on the previous page, that's this one right here, can give you an example of to use two wet signals together. Like if you don't want any of the dry signal, that's what we did with the kick drum here. The kick drum here has none of the dry signal. It's got our distortion and it's got our, we've got a compressor here and a distortion here, and you mix them all together. So that's a couple different things. We've kind of gone over a few different things. Remember, you must keep the dry signal on the original track because otherwise you'll be sending an affected sound into the effects chain, which would make it a serial chain. What that's talking about is this right here. If you put these effects here on this track right here, it would then turn it into a serial chain with this one here. It wouldn't be, and that's also how, if you need more than 10 effects, which is just crazy, but if you needed more than 10 effects in Pro Tools, what you would do is you would send the output into your aux track channel, and then you'd have more effects to mess with. Puppy, what's going on? What time is it, puppy? Is it time to take a break? Is that why you're chewing on me? All right, yeah, let's do this. Let's take a break here. And because this is all talking about the overview of it and then drum mixing stuff, and we're gonna kind of skip this one here because that's very particular to something, but we're gonna come back and talk about effects chains in the next video. So let's go ahead and stop this, and everybody can take a little bit of a break.